Welcome back to Larry Talks. It seems that rugby league news never sleeps, even in the off season. We're 2 months out from the NRL proper, but don't worry about that. You've got all this news happening around in the world, and today we're back to talking about NRL contracts. And this conversation keeps coming up every couple months because the NRL rules are fundamentally broken. So I'm Larry, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Zac Lomax situation, but crucially, I'm not just going to analyze it. I'm going to tell you how we're going to fix it. If you are new to the channel, make sure that you do subscribe because we upload daily rugby league content every single day, and that is what you need in your life. Because at the end of the day, you're either going to be nodding in agreement with me or you're going to be in the comments yelling at me and probably wanting to punch me in the face. But anyway, let's get on with the video. The Zac Lomax situation has taken a turn. Now, Zac Lomax earlier or at the back end of 2024 had sought a release from the Parramatta Eels out of his 1 year into a 3-year deal contract because he was going to join this Rugby 360 group that was being funded by Saudi Arabia. It has since come out in December that this Rugby 360 competition isn't going to launch until 2028. So with that now kicked down the can seemingly for the at least short-term future, Zac Lomax now finds himself without a contract and without an income. So it seems, because Zac Lomax does have a contract with the Parramatta Eels. It's just that the Parramatta Eels and the NRL have said, we're granting you a release, but should you wish to come back to the NRL, you cannot play until the current contract with the Parramatta Eels has reached expiration. Also talk about salary cap and solutions, and that's where the NRL actually needs to address this. So on Zac Lomax, he took a gamble, he's ill-advised. Clearly, he was led to believe that there was massive money and opportunity to work overseas, do a less rigorous schedule, earn a large income, and that would ultimately set him up for life. Who wouldn't want that? It makes a lot of sense. But the due diligence was not done on this Rugby 360 competition, and that's left Zac Lomax in a very vulnerable position. Now, the NRL were right on one component to want to protect the integrity of their competition. We saw it from Peter V'landys. He feared that there would be some sort of exodus, that if other NRL players saw reasonably large profile players, which Zac Lomax is, he is a current State of Origin New South Wales Blues player, opting to leave and chase the money overseas, then there was the fear that we'd see a mass exodus and players wanting to break their NRL contracts. Obviously, the NRL is interested in protecting their product, protecting their investment. You want to keep the best players. It makes complete sense. So Peter V'landys and the NRL's response to all the NRL 360, Rugby 360 rumors was that if you leave, no problem, we'll grant you your release, but you're not coming back and you're not playing for another club until the expiration of that contract. Now, here's where we get into a bit of a pickle. If you release the player from his contract, I personally don't see any legal grounds to ban him from returning to the NRL if it's going to forbid him from earning a future income. It comes down to, what did he sign when he ultimately exited the Parramatta Eels? Did he sign anything? Did he have to sign some sort of agreements that stipulated that he would not return to the NRL for the duration of his existing contract with the Parramatta Eels? These are the questions that come to my mind from an employment law perspective. If you think about it, though, Zac Lomax, if granted a release from the Parramatta Eels and the NRL, then the NRL really doesn't have a leg to stand on to deny him an opportunity to return to the NRL. What I'm trying to say here is, if the Parramatta Eels granted a release, then that means a player proposed something. So there were two parties. One party offered, the other party accepted. Zac Lomax offered to leave. Parramatta agreed to those terms. I think if this went to a fair work situation, and I can't think of any live examples or previous examples of where an NRL player has gone to fair work, but I imagine that it can either go to fair work or there would be some sort of sports tribunal, because sports is a little bit different to traditional employment law, but my understanding is in employment law. And that's where I've spent a number of years working in, so I feel comfortable enough to comment on this. You can't stop someone from earning an honest income. There are a lot of contracts that will get overruled by the Fair Work Commission at a hearing because you can't legally stop someone from earning an income. And in Zac Lomax's situation, he broke his contract because he would have been of the understanding that he could have gone and earned an income elsewhere. I think he's going to end up playing with the Melbourne Storm, one way or another, whether it's through Fair Work, Sports Ombudsman, Acts of God. I think Zac Lomax will end up playing for the Melbourne Storm, simply because it just does not seem feasible to me how you can stop him from participating and playing and earning an income. Come to the fan issue. All of us as fans hate seeing players break contracts. Like we opened with the video, Zac Lomax was 1 year into a 3-year deal with the Parramatta Eels. And let's not forget that he left the St. George Illawarra Dragons because he wanted to chase premiership glory, supposedly, with the Parramatta Eels. And there lies the issue. This is not a Zac Lomax issue. This is an NRL issue. This is a systemic issue, and it's one that needs solving. And this issue has been ignored, and it's been spoken about, and solutions have been proposed, but yet nothing is ever done by the NRL power brokers. I've heard the likes of Phil Gould, who's highly respected, as he should be, talking about a draft. I've heard people talking about transfer windows, transfer fees, internal and external drafts. The options are endless. Here is where I think the perfect solution lies that, one, keeps fans happy, two, gives players the flexibility that they want and need, and three, would provide an entertainment value to the NRL. Let me explain. Like I spoke to earlier, we care about our clubs keeping the best talent, but we also want our club to have the ability to move on talent that we see no longer fits. So the Zac Lomax situation clearly raises an issue, but this is not a player issue. This is not a Zac Lomax issue. This is a systemic NRL contractual issue. There is an issue with the system. The NRL have not created a process, a procedure, a system that is both diplomatic, amicable, and takes the interests of the player, the club, and the most critical stakeholders, the fans, and even the sponsors, let's face it, into consideration. I'm going to come up with a proposal. And in that 4-step proposal, I'm going to give you the best possible solution that I think does take fans into consideration, does allow players to transfer when it's needed, and gives clubs the flexibility to offload players when it's needed, and allows teams to act in their best interests while also ensuring the integrity of an NRL contract. Let's get into it. Step here is the NRL needs to introduce a transfer window. So a transfer window means that you've got a period within the calendar year where players, agents, and clubs can negotiate breaking a contract to secure a transfer to another club. So for example, if Zac Lomax was under contract under the Parramatta Eels, 1 year into a 3-year deal, then Zac Lomax would be able to, in this transfer window, be approached by the Melbourne Storm, and the Melbourne Storm could go to Parramatta and say, we're really interested in signing Zac Lomax. Can we have your permission to negotiate with him to secure a transfer? So this would allow a club-to-club agreement, which ensures that it is amicable and agreeable that that player is going to be put up for sale because the current club is allowing it to happen. It stops the likes of rugby or otherwise speaking to players if the club has not agreed to it. So that's one critical component. Second component of the transfer window, it should happen twice within the calendar year. You need to have one period, and I think that one period, the obvious period, would be starting in 1 November and concluding at the 31st of January. And I've put that period in there because we've got, in the existing calendar, we've got international football that generally falls after the NRL season. And you also have the people who have gone to international duty seem to start preseason a little bit later. Generally will come towards the mid-January mark and then even into February. That taken into consideration, I think the first NRL transfer window can happen between the 1st of November and the 31st of January to secure your transfer for the following season. Beyond that, I think there is an opportunity for a transfer window to happen during the NRL season. And I'd propose that that commences in the first week of State of Origin and concludes at the end of the Origin series. What that means is you can start negotiating from the 10-day period leading up to Origin 1. but then the player can only transfer after the State of Origin series, even when a deal has been made. Propose that is because you don't want to create an unfair advantage for a club during the State of Origin series. It also means that if a player or a club is going to allow a player to go somewhere else, they may more than likely want a replacement or to promote a player from, say, the junior squads or the salary cap top 30, players who are outside the top 30 of the salary cap, promote them, maybe offer them a higher salary. So within the Origin period, you could also create this almost exciting narrative that is happening outside for clubs who perhaps don't have a lot of State of Origin players and are now going to be in the market to strengthen their sides mid-season. I think that that's quite exciting, and I think that that creates lots of talking shows and congestion. It will create media hype. It'll get fans excited for what's possible. But crucially, you're respecting the integrity of a contract system. So while a contract may be broken, it does allow a club-to-club agreement for a player to leave. And I think that that would be really important. So this brings me on to point 2. There has to be some financial viability behind this. You can't allow a player to leave a club for free. That is a bugbear of the fans. So if you're going to allow a player to transfer, there needs to be a transfer fee. And this is where I come to, we need a transfer cap. So this would operate outside of a salary cap and would cap teams from how much money they spend in player transfers. And that would roll within a 12-month period and kind of run it in a calendar year process. So what I'm proposing here is there needs to be transfer fees, but the transfer fees themselves need to be capped. We can't operate like a European football model because there is a salary cap within the NRL and there's only so much money that NRL clubs have to spend. Some clubs also have more money than others. For example, the Canterbury Bulldogs, even when the club itself has run at a loss, have been backed by a very financially healthy leagues club. The likes of the Sydney Roosters are financially backed by a billionaire. The South Sydney Rabbitohs backed by a billionaire. These clubs would have more advantages than, say, the likes of the Canberra Raiders or the Gold Coast Titans. So you want to make sure that you create a system that allows for transfers but is also financially viable. And I think that the way that you can do that is to put bands or percentages tied to the length of contract remaining for the player being transferred out. For example, if a player has 12 months left on their contract, there's no need to negotiate a transfer fee. Why? Because the player would be free to negotiate from 1 November the way they are now, and they would then be able to talk to clubs from that point for the following season. If a player is going to have less than 12 months left on their contract, I don't see a need for a transfer fee to be negotiated. It would be then up to the club to decide if they were willing to do that or not. This is where fans get frustrated. Fans get frustrated because the number one thing you always hear fans say is, but he has a contract. He's got 2 years, 3 years, 5 years remaining on his contract. How can he be allowed to leave? And this is where I would introduce transfer fees. So if a player has 18 months to 24 months, so 18 months to 2 years on their contract, there should be a 5% transfer fee on the existing value of the contract. For example, if a player earns $1 million a season, the transfer fee would have to be 5% of $1 million. And the reason I'm saying that is because that would mean the club who wants to buy the services of this elite player would then need to pay $50,000 transfer fee to secure $1 million player if they had 18 months remaining on their contract, 18 months to 24 months on their contract. If a player has more than 2 years on their contract, then a club would be required to pay 10% of a transfer fee on the existing annual salary amount. So that 50,000 now becomes 100,000 transfer fee. You could allow clubs to have a transfer cap, and it would be up to the NRL to work out what that amount is. And it'd also be up to the NRL to work out, does that amount aggregate every year? Does it increase? Or does it roll into the following season or not? I don't have all the solutions here because I've come up with this idea 5 minutes before I recorded this video, but I am proposing a solution that would respect and put integrity back into NRL contracts. It would put the trust and faith back into fans' minds, and it would allow for an element of excitement within the NRL. And I think that if you can do a concept like this, then it will ensure that players who want to seek pastures new could seek to do that, but it would need to be through the permission of a club, and it would be club to club transfer. I guess the complication with this process would be, so what happens if you got a Zac Lomax situation where rugby is chasing a player, he's got 1 year out of his 3-year contract. I think a club is well within its rights to say, you will need to pay us a transfer fee to allow this player to leave. And if the NRL wanted to have a guardrail like that, then that would also deter the likes of rebel rugby competitions before coming to poach NRL players. To secure a player who is under contract, you're going to need to pay us to break that contract, because that would actually put money back into the NRL club who is forfeiting that player. So if the Parramatta Eels knew they're going to lose Zac Lomax to a rebel rugby franchise, and we said to that rugby rebel franchise, well, you have to pay us X amount of dollars to allow us to release this player from their contract, then that rugby franchise now needs to decide, do we really want to invest this amount of money in this player, or do we go develop our own, find a player from another rugby team, etc. You have it. There's my solution for the NRL solving their never-ending contract saga that has fans pulling their hair out. So before I go bald, there's my proposal. Let me know what you think about it. Put your comments in. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy the concept, or even if you didn't quite agree with the concept, but you think that there might be some legs to it, or you have an alternative solution, get those comments in. I'd love to hear it. I've been Larry. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.